Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Reading the Science podcast. I'm Dr. Jim Dolan, and I'm here with Rick Henshaw. And we also have with us today a special guest who Rick will introduce. I know at the end of our last show, we talked about how we will be discussing today the concept of restorative justice. But in the meantime, a much more important, I shouldn't say much more important, but a very significant report was produced by the Department of Justice. And I will ask Rick to get the ball rolling by talking about that report and how it ties into why we have this special guest with us here today.
Thank you, Jim. For 4 years during the Biden administration, pro-lifers were kind of like a voice crying in the wilderness about how pro-life activists were being targeted by the Biden Department of Justice for selective prosecution, harsh prison sentences, and all kinds of mistreatment at trial. Now, a report from the current Justice Department, a report of over 900 pages after a year of investigation involving review of 700,000 internal DOJ and other government documents, has confirmed what the pro-lifers were saying in those days. It has brought forth the fact that the FACE Act, Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances, was used by the Biden administration, was weaponized by the Biden administration against pro-lifers. Pro-lifers were routinely targeted, even for peaceful, nonviolent civil disobedience or simply a prayerful presence outside of abortion clinics. The FACE Act was supposed to be enforced to protect abortion clinics, pro-life pregnancy centers, and houses of worship against obstruction or, even more so, violence or vandalism. Yet the peaceful pro-life protesters were being routinely arrested, clapped in irons, hauled off to jail, put on trial, usually staged managed trials, convicted and sentenced to years in prison. Meanwhile, after the Dobbs ruling overturning Roe, rarely did the Biden Justice Department seek to investigate and prosecute many instances of violence and vandalism against pro-life pregnancy centers, some of which were being firebombed, or Catholic churches being routinely vandalized. So the report confirms what the pro-lifers are saying, and we have with us today a guest who was a target of that weaponization, was a victim of it. He also happens to be my brother, but don't hold that against him. John Henshaw was part of a pro-life rescue in Washington, D.C., at a late-term abortion clinic, and they were trying to bring out the late-term killings of fully formed babies there, trying to bring that to the public's attention, trying to save lives. But it was a nonviolent sit-in for which they were arrested, brought to trial, convicted. John was sentenced to a little over 2 years in prison. His colleagues all got even more than that. They were all pardoned by President Trump in his first week back in office in 2025. So we wanted to bring John on here today. John, I would like you to give us your reaction to this report and bring out for our viewers what you want people to know about what's in the report and some of your personal witness of what you experienced that comports with what this report has brought out. So give us your reaction.
Okay, well, let me first start. It is a 900-page report, and I haven't finished with it yet. I'm about halfway through. It's an excellent report in that it's not difficult reading, and I urge everyone to take a look at it. You don't have to go through 400 pages. The first 100 pages are excellent. It's laid out exactly what the Department of Justice was doing to pro-lifers during the Biden administration. And it breaks it down very clearly so you can read. Most of the rest of the pages after that is the documentary evidence, most of which is emails. I just want to start quickly in that, obviously, pro-lifers want the focus on the children that were losing, particularly the late-term butcher in Washington, which was the reason I went there. He's well known up and down the Eastern Seaboard for doing abortions and admitting that if he has a live birth from that abortion, he will destroy the child. So it's important to understand that they are, without question, the main victims. But pro-life has to broaden its perspective a little bit here, because we do need to understand that in place, even now, in place in the federal law enforcement system is the FACE Act and conspiracy statutes that can be tacked on against pro-lifers, and the next administration can reinvigorate that. Trump has put a stop to it. His Department of Justice is not following through on any of that. He's not going to prosecute us under federal statutes. But his term ends, as we know, in 2029. So another administration could bring it back because it's still on the books.
Could I just jump in there on the conspiracy? Yeah, because correct me if I'm wrong, the FACE Act, at least for first offenses, carries a maximum of 1 year in prison. The conspiracy, which is kind of a catch-all thing that they seem to throw in federal cases when they really want to lay on the punishment, can carry up to an additional 10 years in prison. On these very vague conspiracy charges.
So that's very scary, John. So at the end of the Trump term, if a new president who's sympathetic to the pro-abortion movement comes into power, they can revitalize the FACE Act and weaponize it again against conservative Christians, pro-lifers, and certainly against conservative Catholics. So please pick up on that point, because that is something that's going to be very chilling for us all together.
Yeah, and that's what people need to understand here. We're talking about a federal law enforcement system that has gone wrong, and it's really as simple as that. And it's not just pro-lifers that it's affecting, but we're going to stick to pro-life because we certainly suffered under this, and it certainly applies to us. But federal law enforcement is in trouble in this country. There's too much going on with regard to the report. The Trump administration found that there was collusion, the crime that was never used against us or Donald Trump, even though they kept claiming there was collusion going on. But the point of the matter is that between the pro-abortion leadership in this country and our Justice Department under Joe Biden, there was a close-knit, developed plan of action to go after pro-lifers. And in the report, they document that they were naming specific pro-lifers that they were going after. My name didn't pop up so far as I've seen, but certainly Father Fidelis was one, Lauren Handy was another, Will Goodman was another. These are pro-life leaders who do rescues, and they were being bandied about in the emails about how to go after them. Did you watch them when they went to this pro-life march? They were actually monitoring pro-lifers' activities.
And they submitted dossiers, I understand the report said, including pictures of family members, including minor children. And can we really believe that the abortion groups were just giving them to the Justice Department and not spreading them around throughout their networks?
And if they know it, no, that's exactly right. They were definitely going after the families as well. And it needs to be understood with federal law enforcement, there's a reason why Hillary Clinton, Janet Reno, and Charles Schumer introduced the FACE Act in the mid-1990s when a lot of rescues were happening all over the country. They felt they needed to do something dramatic to stop it, and I always believed for 30 years since it got passed, yes, it was done to stop pro-life rescues. And certainly that was part of it. But I now recognize, having spent 17 months in jail, that there was even something bigger going on in their minds. They understood that if you can charge someone for violating a federal statute, well, that throws them into the federal prosecutorial system. And one of the first things they can do, it was mentioned, the conspiracy charges. Now, when I was in jail, just about every other federal inmate, not pro-life rescuers, they were in there for identity theft or embezzlement. They had conspiracy charges too. It's become standard practice for our federal government to charge conspiracy against virtually any criminal because that adds the years on. And the federal prosecutors trumpet all over this country that they have a 96 to 97% conviction rate. And the reason is they go in, we saw this with General Flynn, the friend of Trump, who was threatened and his family was threatened with 30 years in jail. And that's what they come after you with. Because the conspiracy charges add more time in jail, they're telling you, take the plea, go to jail for 5 years, or we're going to hit you for 30 years.
John,
And
John,
people take the plea, that goes towards their conviction rate.
let me just jump in for a second. So this is all very powerful stuff, but I would also like you to talk about not only the fact that the prosecutorial system was rigged against you, and they were out to punish you to the maximum extent that they felt that they can get away with, but also personalize it a little bit, John. You were willing, you knew the charges were coming your way. You were willing to self-surrender, but they chose to apprehend you in a much different manner. And Rick alluded to, or you alluded to, how families are affected. Can you please describe what it all was like when the FBI showed up at your house?
Okay. I will just very quickly, the report mentions the FBI raids on our houses, and I'll give a quick summary of a couple of them. But the Justice Department has from the beginning sworn off the raids. They said that was a decision by the FBI. It wasn't them. I think that's a possibility given the fact that the FBI has shown itself to be completely ruthless towards nonviolent American citizens who do have rights. Now, in my case, we were charged and we were given summonses to reappear in Washington court. We rescued in October of 2020. More than a year and a half passes. They postponed, because you remember COVID, so they postponed our initial court date, and they just kept saying it's indeterminate, keep checking back, you'll get a court date. And again, this was COVID period, so we were sitting around waiting. And then on March 30th, 2022, at 6 o'clock in the morning, fortunately, I was up for an early shift at work, so I was in my kitchen. They came pounding at the door, no notice beforehand, and certainly we would have shown up in court. It's part of our belief, not just in the legal system, we believe it's an opportunity to witness for the babies on record in court. Because the babies don't get a day in court. They're executed without legal proceedings. We believe we're their voice in court. We would have shown up if they had told us that we had to show up for whatever. They didn't bother. They wanted to terrorize. They wanted to intimidate. So the pounding came on the door. Fortunately, I was near the front door. I said, "Can I help you?" FBI, open the door. And I find there are 5 SUVs on my lawn. There are 9 FBI agents to come and arrest. Well, at the time, what was I, 68, 69? And so anyway, and they took me away.
And not only that, John, the mentality of the FBI personnel at that point, let's face it, they would have used violence against you if they felt in their subjective frame of mind that it would have been justified. So you used the key term. Their purpose was to terrorize.
Right. That's exactly what it was. Just very quickly, several of my friends didn't get to the door in time, and they smashed their doors open. One young man in Northern Virginia, Jonathan Darnell, it was still dark outside. They smashed his door open. He has his home video surveillance system, and he's put it up online, the video showing them smashing the door open, pointing their guns inside, waving their flashlights around, demanding that he and his housemates get on their knees, put their hands behind their head, and walk out backward on their knees out of the house. Now, this was an extraordinarily dangerous situation, and this goes to the recklessness of the FBI, which has been documented time and again regarding other people. But the thing that needs to come back, federal law enforcement is certainly running wide, serving political ends. And it was never meant to do that. It's a tremendous threat to civil liberties. And I do have to say also, one of the encouragements for all of this is this terrorism stuff, where they've hung it around our ears that we're the domestic terrorists. And I just want to take one other side thing. My experience, if there are any people out there that have read the story of Mark Houck, a father from Pennsylvania, whose raid was very similar to mine, but his case was unique, and it's important to understand what the Justice Department was trying to do. Mark Houck was not part of any rescue. He never entered the abortion mill and sat and prayed and sang. He didn't do any of that. He was outside on the sidewalk praying, and his son was with him, his 12-year-old son, and one of the pro-abortion death escorts came over and was harassing his son. Mark moved over, got between the pro-abortionist and his son to protect him. The police were called, and the police ultimately decided no violation took place, nobody got arrested, nothing happened. The federal government, the Department of Justice, decided to go after Mark Houck. And he was raided by 9 SUVs and 25 FBI, pounding on his door, threatening to smash it, guns drawn. He had young children. My children were at least grown up when they raided my house. He had young children, and they were waving their guns around. Now, Mark ended up taking it to trial, and he was acquitted. He was acquitted from violating the faith or committing conspiracy. And there was arguments within the FBI that's been documented where FBI agents were saying, we investigated this guy for violence or terrorism. There's nothing there. He never did anything. And they were told by their superiors in Washington in very unruly language, we don't care. These people are terrorists and we're going to put them all in jail. That's our FBI in America today. So, I just wanted to emphasize again with Mark Houck, if they could have established a precedent with him and put him in jail when he didn't rescue, it would have terrorized sidewalk counselors who are outside abortion mills throughout this country to offer women the hope in the last moments before they can change their mind. And they tend to be successful frequently. But the point is, that would have had a chilling effect on pro-lifers coming out to the mills to pray, advocate for the babies, witness for the babies, and help the moms. And that's what our Department of Justice was up to going after Mark Houck. So anyway, I've given a vast scope of what's going on and why pro-lifers need to look up a bit and pay attention beyond just our issue. There are problems in this country, and they're very serious problems. Sure.
One other thing I think needs to be brought out is the way the trials were managed. Now, you told us, and I'll ask you to share it, the jury selection, and the report makes clear that there were efforts by the Department of Justice and the individual prosecutors to keep certain people that could be identified as having strong religious convictions off of juries. Now, the interesting thing was, in one case they said, or maybe several cases, the prosecutors were concerned that the judges they were getting were deemed to be more conservative, and they said, we can't be obviously kicking people off because of their religion. We have to find other ways to do it, to find out the information we want without the judge realizing what we're doing. In your case, they didn't have a problem with the judge, did they? Tell us about your experience in jury selection in your case.
Yeah, the jury selection, 100 people were brought in, and each one was interviewed. And the question was, by the way, it's amusing. We had a word list we were not allowed to use during our trial. Abortion, partial birth abortion, late term abortion, anything to do with abortion was disallowed for court vocabulary. If we got on the witness stand, we could mention abortion, but otherwise, our lawyers couldn't bring it up, couldn't cross-examine their witnesses on abortion. The judge said, no, this is not a case about abortion, which is amusing about America. When people look back historically, we will find our courts gave us legal abortion throughout the land, and then they have prohibited it from being discussed in the courtroom ever since.
That would have been like, for example, saying that when Martin Luther King does a sit-in, he's on trial for obstruction, he can't mention racial discrimination or segregation or civil rights.
That's right. He's just
nothing about the reason behind
what we're doing.
Actions that can, in the minds of some jurors, maybe give it some justification.
And again, the contrast there, we're not allowed to mention any of that. In cross-examining the possible jurors, it was all about abortion. It was, well, have you ever done this? Have you ever done that? They were, and the question, what we found was more than 50% of the 100 people had either contributed to Planned Parenthood or participated in an anti-Dobbs rally, Dobbs being the decision that overturned Roe v. Wade in 2022. They were specifically, more than 50% of them agreed that, yes, they had done one of those two things. Washington, I understand, is a very pro-abortion town, but this was truly, truly heavily weighted in the jury pool. There were only 2 out of 100 people who voiced any kind of pro-life sentiment. One was adamant that abortion was murder, and so of course they weren't taking him for the jury. The other guy was kind of, I do think it's taking a life, but a woman still has the right. But that's as close as we got. So we're saying 98 out of 100 people were not at all sympathetic to pro-life. That's the way it looked. And that brings up a whole nother question that I do have, which is beyond our trial, so I won't go into it.
So John, Houck sued the federal government for the way he was treated,
yes.
and he won his civil
suit.
suit.
They reached a settlement, correct? That's what the report said.
You were a victim of a wrongful prosecution. And when you think about all the details involved in terms of how it all played out, and the judge was determined to make sure that you were convicted, and all the other factors that you just mentioned, along with those that you haven't mentioned. Anyway, it seems clear to me that similar to the Houck situation, you are a victim of a wrongful prosecution. Have you considered suing the federal government for being a victim of that?
Yes, I certainly am still considering it. I have to admit, the report coming out seems to me to be a huge part of my case, because they are documenting these are crimes that are committed. They were committed by the Department of Justice because, and this is always the problem with tyranny, because they are the Department of Justice, pretty much anything they do is viewed as, well, it's legitimate. It's the Department of Justice. No, in America, our government, particularly law enforcement, has to behave and follow certain procedures, because otherwise we have thugs with law degrees who are terrorizing people and seeking to punish political enemies. And they certainly violated it. The report substantiates the violations. There were firings based upon what they found in the report that were announced. And in the report, you may have missed this, there's one line which said, the Department of Justice has not ruled out possible prosecution of these former employees of the Department of Justice. And I absolutely would love to see that. I'm not saying I'm going to.
Before we run out of time, could you also elaborate on or speak about the role of the media in terms of how they are not only complicit but even promoters of the pro-abortion view?
Sure. And they always have been. And if you read Bernard Nathanson's book, he documents how they counted on, when they were legalizing more, they counted on the media being on their side. And the media has not disappointed them. The media has been pro-abortion all the way down the line. And if you doubt me on that, I'll just say one simple thing. Find me in any of the major news media in the last 50 some odd years since Roe v. Wade. Show me the broadcast where they went into the developing child in the womb. You haven't seen it. They never have. The media has suppressed the reality of life before birth. Yes.
And that gets into something that might be for a future show, and we're going to talk about the Dobbs anniversary. But yeah, and it did the developing baby they won't even show. And another thing that strikes me about the media is, of course, they will never show the what you folks found, the bodies, the horrifically brutalized bodies of those late term babies that one of your members found in their trash. Yet we can't turn on the TV without seeing gruesome depictions of crimes, murder scenes. You know, you can't pick up a tabloid newspaper without seeing pictures of those kinds of things. You can't watch TV without horrific commercials of the real suffering of animals, and I don't like to see that either. You know, or even hungry children around the world, and we need to know about all of that. But never will they show you what happens to a baby in an abortion. As you say, they won't even show you the beautiful pictures of the developing life in the womb. It's really a remarkable.
What I'm coming to the conclusion in my thinking, and I'm wondering if you guys agree, that even though we can prove without a doubt that the unborn is a human being, the people in favor of abortion, they don't care. They don't seem to care that it's a human being. We keep pounding the truth that from the moment of conception, that this is undeniably a human life, and science is on our side, and we can make that case very convincingly. I've come to the conclusion that they don't care. John, when you were imprisoned, you wrote me some magnificent letters, and you talked about the cruelty and brutality that was common in ancient times. The peoples perpetuating those kind of crimes back then did not care. They knew these were human beings that they were violently treating and murdering. They didn't care because of their self-interest. I don't want, this is grounds or basis for another show, but that's my impression of the pro-abortion mentality, is that they don't care. How do we get past that? How do we overcome that? That they don't care. You're espousing truths. Rick's espousing truths. I do my small part, but I'm beginning to realize that we have the facts on our side. We have the science on our side. But how do we get people to be more moral?
Well, this is an extraordinarily deep thing, because there's no question in the ancient world, and this is a left turn, so I prefer not to go down it right now. But the fact of the matter is, child sacrifice was all over the ancient world, specifically in that hill country of Cana, where God kept trying to put his chosen people, and they kept being corrupted and started doing child sacrifice. The fact is that human beings have this proclivity. There is no question that murdering children is the province of the devil. There's no question he wants us to participate in it. He has succeeded in convincing us to do it. So ultimately what it touches on is a major spiritual battle. It emphasizes, when you say how to get them to understand or change or whatever, we have to offer all that up to God, because he's the only one that could truly affect a major conversion here. We offer our service to him as if there's anything we can do. And by the way, again, in a spiritual battle, part of the way that we can be of service to God in conversion is to sacrifice, to suffer on behalf of right. And in so doing, God is able to act more with people.
So I'm going to
hopefully we're somewhat seeing that.
Rick, before you close the show, I'm going to read from last Sunday's reading, one of the sections from the second reading. Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal that is taking place among you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you. But rejoice insofar as you're sharing Christ's suffering, that you may be also glad and shout for joy when his glory is revealed. You are reviled for the name of Christ. You are blessed, you are blessed, because the Spirit of glory, which is the Spirit of God, is resting on you.
Thank you, Jim. And I think we both want to thank John because what Jim just read, you and the rescuers all over the country now and going back for 30 years have certainly, most pro-lifers have endured various levels of suffering. But what you've gone through and what you went through this time and standing up to this and really bringing it to the public's attention so that now the current administration wants to bring it out and wants to try to rectify it. So that's the kind of suffering on behalf of good and right that reading calls for. So thank you for being with us here today. Thank you all for watching. Tune in again in 2 weeks. Our next show, we're going to discuss 4 years since the Dobbs ruling overturned Roe v. Wade. Where is the pro-life movement now 4 years later? Thank you again.